woke up this morning, not used to this feeling. There's nothing standing in my way no more. The sun is still breathing, the sea is bleeding. I'm living in a brand new day. Come on, oh, come on, yeah. I woke up this morning, not used to this.
Rock City Network's coming to you from the National Film and Sound Archive. Is this headquarters, Maryanne?
No, it actually isn't our headquarters in Canberra,
Okay.
but we've got an office here and in Sydney.
Okay, well, National Film and Sound Archive, the offices for Melbourne, and joining me, Maryanne Doyle. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you.
No,
Yeah.
thank you so much for giving me your time, especially around, we're only a few days off Christmas. We had so many important people to get to talk to at the World Music Expo. We missed a lot of you because you were in and out, you were very busy and had things to do, but we finally caught up with you. We've been looking forward to it. I guess by starting off, we'd just like to know a little bit, you're a sound archivist here, and just run through your position and exactly what happens here at the National Film and Sound Archive.
Okay, well, we're funded by the federal government to actually preserve Australia's audiovisual history. So my role here is to actually collect sound recordings from music artists, from radio broadcasters, and be in touch with what films are being made that may impact on or be about Australian music. And I cover all the different genres of music and all different ages. So one day I might be dealing with a recording from the 1890s, and the next day I'm dealing with a radio broadcast from last week.
Yeah.
So it's incredibly huge variety of different types of recordings that we deal with. And going to the World Music Expo is really just to keep up to date with some of the new artists that are coming out, and really all the exciting developments in Indigenous music in Australia too in the last few years.
Excellent. Now, what I was interested to know, with all the social networking and online movement in the music world, how has that affected the National Film and Sound Archive and what you do here?
Well, we're trying to keep up. We have to preserve all the old analogue formats as well as digital formats, and as formats change and the way people work and communicate and distribute, we try and keep up with that. Sometimes we're not entirely abreast of everything as it happens, but sometimes a little bit of distance helps to make the right decisions about how to preserve some formats. But more and more so, we're actually using social networking ourselves in our work, and we're curating more and more of Australian material online on our website, and we're going in and out of, historical, serious analysis of stuff with the public's reaction and their own personal reflections of what they feel about music.
Yeah.
So we run a program called Sounds of Australia where people can actually nominate their favourite sound recordings, and then we can start a dialogue about that.
Okay. Now, it's interesting. So you gauge a lot of what you collect and archive through the public interest, but do you actually have a set, like a checklist that ticks off the boxes in order for something to be collected and archived?
In various different ways. In Australian film, if a film has been given government funding, part of the funding arrangement is that they do archive that material with us. With things like record companies and broadcasters, it's more of a trying to set up a relationship with those bodies, because we depend on their generosity in donating the material to us. So we try and set up formal relationships. We try and build personal relationships with people in various companies to set up arrangements so we can get their material. But in addition to all those formal things that are ongoing, we also are lucky enough to get people like collectors and artists who are maybe at different stages in their career decide that they want their material to be archived. So that's how we often get really interesting material from the past.
Now, does each office, you said Canberra is your head office and you've got Sydney and Melbourne as well, do they all play specific roles in their positions?
Yes, to a certain extent. Canberra really is where we can showcase the material from the collection. We've got a wonderful cinema there, we've got an exhibition space, but it's also where all our technical facilities are, and climate-controlled storage. So really, state-of-the-art techniques and methods used to preserve and conserve. People are, doing things like repairing perforations in film on a very individual frame level. So there's incredible work that happens up there. But in the Sydney and Melbourne offices, we're really more the front face, actually liaising directly with the industries and feeding back to Canberra what are the issues, what are the developments, how people are dealing with, new technologies, copyright, all the different issues that artists have to deal with on a daily basis.
Okay. Now, how was the feedback for you? What were you reporting back on after the Australasian World Music Expo? What did you take from that?
Well, actually, one of the things, as well as the different artists that are coming about and also the growing interest from overseas, what I found was quite interesting, which I think also reflects Melbourne, is that there's more interaction happening between maybe mainstream music and those musics that are considered either in the category of world or somehow not mainstream. I think it's like there's more of an interest in doing things together and that people can find new ways of doing things, and also we're coming up with unique Australian blends of material here. And I think Melbourne is a great showcase for that because the live music scene here is so rich and it enables those interactions to happen all the time.
Now, I'd be interested in what are some of the more interesting sound bites, I guess you would call it, that you've archived. Let's start from some of the oldest stuff that you have on file.
Oh, right. Well, the oldest sound collection that we've got is actually a Victorian based one. A chap called Thomas Rome, he lived in Warrnambool in the 1890s, and he liked new technology, and he imported wax cylinder discs from America. And they had recordings on them of American music, but they're also blank cylinders, and he had the equipment available, so he actually went out and made recordings himself. And this is in the 1890s, and they have survived. And so we've done a bit of work on preserving them and understanding them, but we actually, and this is what happens in the archival world, we're also very dependent upon independent researchers who discovered this collection. We've preserved it, but we've actually drawn upon their work to understand what these things are. But, that's just an example from the very old days, but we can go up to more recent times. Another example of, say, the Melbourne scene is the collection that I worked on of Keith Glass, who set up the original Missing Link record shop, and he opened the first import record shop in Australia. And he also managed quite a lot of bands and started numerous labels, and he actually got into a few sticky situations when he imported records in that were actually found to be banned in Australia. But he was part of a great interest in alternative and punk and new wave music that was coming from overseas, but also the local stuff that was happening here. So that was a fantastic collection to work on. There are so many. At the moment I'm working on radio collections from the 1950s through to the 80s, and what's fantastic about that is not only listening to it, but all the wonderful scrapbooks where radio stations would actually keep press clippings, and it just brings to life the whole surroundings, not just of the recording itself, but the scene that was happening in Melbourne at the time, why that particular radio broadcaster was important. There's lots of stuff about Stan Rofe, who was a very important person in the whole development of pop music in radio in Australia. Again, another Melbourne person. So I've really immersed myself in the recordings of Melbourne, and some of my Canberra colleagues, they might work on collections from all over Australia.
It's. I mean, it's so interesting. The stories you must hear and the things you must find out would be incredible. Would there be any books? Is there anything coming out to sort of archive this stuff? In books as well. I know you keep all this stuff in a locked vault, temperature controlled, all that sort of thing.
Yes.
But,
we don't actually publish books ourselves, but yes, there does seem to be in recent years more and more books are coming out by various journalists and music writers about the history of Australian popular music. So I think it's something that they often draw upon material that we hold in our collection. We do get filmmakers coming to us who are doing documentaries about Australian film. We get exhibitions who are looking for artefacts, and people sometimes may not necessarily use items from our collection, but they're going back into a radio interview with a particular artist, and that feeds their research about their material. So, I mean, our collection is very much focused on the audio-visual. Mm-hmm. We do have papers. We do have a great reference library in Canberra, which has lots of books and publications and magazines. But mostly the shining sort of, jewel of our collection is, in fact, all the films, all the sound recordings. Also, we've got fantastic artefacts of equipment. So we can display the equipment that particular recordings was played on or recorded on, and they're an important part of the history too. And in fact, the Sounds of Australia project that I mentioned before, we made a show reel about those sounds. It's on our YouTube channel, and it actually shows you some of the equipment that was used in making these recordings, going right back to the 1890s, right up to sort of more recent years. And that equipment, not only are they exhibition items, but we also have ones that have to be working models, because if we want to digitise any of these old recordings, we have to have the right equipment. We also have to have the right technicians who still know how to maintain the equipment and to get the best possible result out of digitising the material.
That'd be few and far between the people that could maintain that sort of equipment.
Yeah, we're very lucky that we get people who have worked in the industry, who have that direct experience, and then can feed into restoring and digitising material from another era.
Now, what I'd also be interested to find out is, as with your donations and people that do give stuff to the archives, apart from journalists and researchers, artists. What about well-known artists? Do you have many that submit to the archives?
Oh yes, they do. And the other great thing that artists get involved in is we have an oral history program. So regularly we're interviewing artists about their careers, and in some instances we're able to go back to them after a period of time, so we can keep up to date with them. Yesterday in this very room, Colin Hay started his oral history with us. So we've had some great artists from who are out there performing artists, but we also interview technicians, producers, people behind the scenes, but who are very important in the development of those industries, and who often have great anecdotes and descriptions of why things happened in a certain way. And that's a very important part of what we're doing. And in recent times, we've actually started a project called the Heath Ledger Oral History Project, where we're going to try and interview artists at the beginning of their careers and then return to them, because often it is the case that we may miss artists because for whatever reason their career is cut short. So as much as possible, we want to be able to capture those people and hear their stories.
Well, it's an amazing story in itself, just being able to chat to you about that sort of thing. And Let's just move into a little bit about film. Where do you start with the collection of your films here at the National Film and Sound Archive?
Well, again, we've got the earliest films in Australia going back into the 1890s, a very early Melbourne Cup footage, of course. That was something that's always been of great interest in Australia. And the story of the Kelly Gang, which is considered to be one of the first dramatic films in the world, and that again focuses on a very strong interest that Australians had at the time, the stories about the bushrangers. And yes, so we do have very early material, and we also go into the television world as well. So the television industry in Australia has been very, very strong. So we've got a fantastic collection there as well. But yeah, surprisingly, there's still early films that come to us still. But a lot of the early cinema didn't survive because it was on fragile formats that unfortunately did not. Were flammable and often were destroyed in fires or weren't kept by in such a way that they could survive.
Now, I've myself experienced through Gil Matthews at Aztec Records his reissue work, and during an interview with him, he explained to me that sometimes they find a lot of the material. There's been instances where they've found master tapes at dumps, and records in the trash, and master recordings in other places where they shouldn't be. Does it shock you to hear that, or have you ran into an instance where you've been given something that's come from somewhere it shouldn't have been?
Yeah, well, actually, that does happen quite often. In Australia, we have an arrangement where if you publish a book, you give a copy to the National Library so that it's preserved, but we don't have the same arrangement with audio-visual material. And so when a company closes down, when their circumstances change, they must face, what do we do with this material? They may not be aware or interested in preserving the material, but surprisingly and fantastically, there's usually individuals around who save things from the skip, and who end up talking to us about it. So, yeah, that still does happen. Yes, unfortunately.
It's amazing that it actually does happen.
Yeah.
But at least there are people like yourself and everyone else at the National Film and Sound Archive to keep that going. It's an amazing thing you do, and thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. It's been great talking to you.
I think we'll have to come back and keep up to date with everything that's going on.
Oh, wonderful! Yeah.
Is there anything any projects in the works right now that's worth mentioning? Well, I mean, it's all worth mentioning, but anything?
I think our Sounds of Australia is our ongoing project, and that's a great way for the public to get involved and just interact with us on our website and tell us what they think is important and why, and what good stories about it. There's also a place too on our website where film material is curated, and that gives you an opportunity to interact with what people have written about particular Australian films.
Okay, great. Well, we'll put all the information up there anyway, so if you do have anything to offer, or if you want to get in contact here at the National Film and Sound Archive, you can do that. Maryanne Doyle, thank you very much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm looking forward to our next chat, and thank you so much for your time this close to Christmas.
That's fine. I enjoyed it.
No worries.
Thank you.
It's Maryanne Doyle here at the National Film and Sound Archive for Rock City Networks.
There's nothing standing in my way no more. The sun is still breathing, the sea is bleeding. I'm living in a brand